right, so let's get started. I'm Tamara from Video My Job, and we are an enterprise video solution that will help you scale employee-generated video content. But before you start scaling any kind of employee-generated content, it's a good idea to have a solid EVP and messaging framework in place so that you can have confidence that your team are spreading messages that align with your employer brand. And that's where Margie and Elissa come in. So they are going to share with us some great getting set up or getting your EVP and EB ready for consumption or execution. So we will do some Q&A, so please feel free to write your questions as they come up in the chat or in the Q&A button. And towards the end, Margie will try and answer as many as we can. And if we don't get to them all, then we'll send her responses in the follow-up email tomorrow. So over to you, Margie.
Thank you, Tam, and good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. End of the day for us, but I just want to thank you all for tuning in. I know we've got people from across the globe, and I just want to say firstly, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to learn more about this topic. And I'm absolutely delighted to be sharing, the key steps around creating your EVP in-house without outsourcing to agencies or consultants so that you can save your business a ton of money while at the same time building your skills and capability and ultimately elevating your professional standing in the process. So there's going to be a lot of useful information that we're sharing today that you can apply straight away. So I want to encourage you to close down your other tabs, turn your phone to silent. I know these days it's so easy to get distracted, but I think it's going to be really beneficial for you to just tune in and focus with us for the next 60 minutes or so. Now, just before we kick off, I'd love to take a quick poll to see where you all are on your EVP journey so we can get a feel for who we've got on the room. So Tamara, if you'd like to share our poll, and you just need to click the option that would apply best for you, whether you're have already got a pumping EVP, whether it's a priority for you in 2020, perhaps you know it needs some work, but you're struggling to get some buy-in, or you might be in that category of wondering what is an EVP. So take the time to have a vote. And Tamara, how are we going on those? I can't see results there.
So at the moment, the majority of the room is either the priorities for developing an EVP next year, or they have one, but it needs either a bit of work or a bit of refresh, and they're struggling to get buy-in from the business. Okay, that is where we've landed today.
Okay, so you are all in the right place then on this webinar. A little bit of other housekeeping. There's a worksheet which Tamara is now going to share in the chat, and you can download it now. Just because we're trying to cram a lot of information into the 60 minutes here on the webinar, I'm going to refer to it during the session, but encourage you to use the information that you've gleaned from our time together and fill in the worksheets afterwards. Don't worry if you can't download it, because you'll also be sent a copy in the follow-up email. All right, so let's kick off. I want to start by sharing 3 facts that I think that you may be able to relate to. So fact number 1, too many organizations are missing out on the best talent because they lack a compelling EVP and they don't know where to start. Now, I've seen it time and again over the past decade or longer. There are plenty of companies who are delivering an awesome employee experience, and they're giving great opportunities to their people and kicking some real goals when it comes to their products and services. Yet they're still losing talent to their competitors because they're either one of 2 things. A, the world's best kept secret, or B, their brand is known but misunderstood in the market. So these organizations know that they need a compelling EVP, but they just don't know where to get started. Typically, most of these organizations don't have the internal capability around EVP creation, so they look externally for help and advice to get it done. And this leads us to fact number 2. Brand agencies are expensive and frequently don't deliver results. Now, I'm not saying they're all bad. Today is definitely not a bashing session on agencies, because good ones do exist. But you have to know that you definitely pay for a lot of overheads when you're working with an agency. And at the end of the day, no one knows your brand and your business like you do. And if you end up with an EVP that doesn't truly reflect your brand and your people, then you're not going to get a tangible result from your marketing activities. And this is when outsourcing can become much more costly than you initially think. So I've personally seen plenty of organisations part with a significant chunk of their budgets to pay an agency or a consultant for the development of their EVP, and it ended up, for a number of reasons, not being able to implement them with success. So this leads us to fact number 3. Many HR and TA teams are in between a rock and a hard place. So they're responsible for delivering the best talent to the business, yet they don't have a brand message to support their efforts. And they might be trying to do it themselves, yet most HR teams are time poor. They're consistently being asked to do more with less. I've never heard of an HR or TA team that's over-resourced. Sometimes, if you're lucky, the marketing team might step in to help out with some skills, resource, or even budget. But I still think that this is still fairly rare. So this leaves these organisations feeling frustrated, overwhelmed, and somewhat indignant. I wonder if you can relate to any of these. So feeling frustrated because you have a good brand story to tell, yet you're losing talent to your competitors. Or possibly feeling overwhelmed because you're not a marketer, yet you're expected to think and act like a marketer. And have you ever felt indignant because you're responsible for finding the best talent, yet you're not given the resources or support to do it properly? So I certainly know how this feels. I've been in your shoes. In fact, I spent 5 years client side at EY feeling many of these frustrations, and then witnessed for myself many of my clients during the time at LinkedIn going through the same kinds of frustrating issues. So I think this is probably a good time to introduce myself properly. My background is in marketing, but I've spent the last 12 odd years in the talent marketing space because I really wanted to do something that would have more of an impact on people. And I love that there are so many nuances and subtleties around employer branding that you don't find in typical B2B or B2C marketing, because if you think about it, buying a career within an organization is such a highly emotive purchasing decision. So from my time client side at EY, I got this first-hand experience in the amount of energy and persistence and influencing that it takes to get an EVP developed and a brand program off the ground. And this experience gave me a real depth of understanding of the types of challenges that you're facing in taking a marketing approach to talent attraction. And then from my time at LinkedIn, I gained a breadth of expertise advising a range of businesses, from fast-growing tech companies to more complex and conservative organisations, on how to build their talent brand. Now, what I noticed during this time is just how many organisations have a real desire to have a crack at doing their own EVP. They just need some help with the how-to. So even when I left LinkedIn in 2016, I was initially consulting to organisations, so going in and doing their EVPs for them. But this notion of empowering clients and teaching them to fish rather than doing it for them just kept bubbling away in the back of my mind. And eventually that's why the EVP Co was born. So today my goal is to really show you how to become self-sufficient in employer branding. By the end of this webinar, you're going to have good insight into why your business needs a compelling EVP, not just to attract the best talent, but how it will impact the bottom line. Why you no longer need to spend tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars to an agency or consultant to get one. The 5 overarching steps to creating your EVP in-house, and the importance of following the right framework and the right support and guidance if you've never been through the process before. How you can become an employer branding expert in your own right. And I'll show you my system for EVP success and introduce you to Elissa, who's been right there in your shoes as a non-marketer who has successfully followed a formula and done a great job to lead the creation of her company's EVP. Now, I suspect most of you on this webinar are already familiar with EVP and employer branding, but I just want to do a quick recap so that we're all on the same page around the definitions and benefits. So your employer brand is your reputation and image as an employer. It's the way that you're positioned in the minds of your employees and prospective candidates. Your employee value proposition, well, that describes the characteristics, benefits, and appeal of working for your organization. So it's like the messaging that underpins and inspires your employer brand, and it tells your unique story of who you are so that you can attract, engage, and retain the right people for your business. Employer branding, on the other hand, think of it as a verb. It's the expression of your EVP. So it's the way that you articulate your EVP, and it includes things like your marketing creative, activities and channels that you use to take your value proposition to market. Now, we've had a bit of a light power outage, that's fine. Done well. Research has shown that having a strong employer brand has a direct impact on talent acquisition by increasing response rates to recruiter outreach, as well as response rates to job adverts. And if you do your job of employer branding well, it can also reduce cost per hire by up to half and significantly reduce employee turnover. And most importantly, having a solid employer brand hits the bottom line. So investing in employer branding can lead to higher shareholder value overall, alongside higher levels of business profitability. So great reasons to be working on your employer brand. So the challenge for most companies, as I see it, is not that they don't have anything great to say, that they just don't know what to focus in on consistently because they have so many potential messages that they could be putting out into the market. So focused consistency is the key to creating cut through in your brand messaging. And it's so important if you want to become top of mind with your ideal candidates. So I just want to pause here and get a bit of feedback from those of you on the line today and ask you, what is the biggest challenge that you're having when it comes to employer branding or EVP? And you can just type in the chat box. I think, again, Tamara can help us out because I can't actually see the chat box with, you know, the kinds of challenges that people are having. So just go ahead and type away. It's always great to get some input and participation from those in the audience. Okay, Tamara.
It's a very familiar one that's just come up from Sophie, which is buy-in and support from marketing. I'm not representative of all marketers here, but I do know that can be quite a challenge. Ed has said making it local and global in an organisation with many different brands, getting buy-ins from other departments, historic reputation. So I guess moving past a legacy kind of brand for some businesses. And then Paul has a big challenge as a global business covering 85 countries, you know, that developing a consistent brand voice whilst also servicing all of those different regions.
Wow. Definitely some big challenges you've got there, particularly the ones around the global and local and facilitating it across multiple markets. So hopefully some of what we share today is going to help you. And certainly the challenges around engaging stakeholders, particularly marketing. I've got a slide dedicated to that, so you're in the right place for it. Okay, thanks for your input, guys. Much appreciated. Alrighty, let's move on. So here's the kicker. Your employer brand is not what you say it is. It's what they experience in working for you. And so that word authenticity, I know it's overused, but it is critical in your messaging. You need to be real, especially if you're targeting millennials, because they can smell the BS a mile away. And so this is why it's so important to start with your EVP first. It's the foundation. It's the platform for all of your employer branding activities. And so rigor around the process of creating your EVP will help to ensure that you can bring an inspiring yet truthful version of your employment experience to life. Okay, what I want to do now is introduce you to one of my clients, Elissa Fletcher, who in my books is an absolute champion. She is the Global Talent Mobility and HR Systems Manager at Bravura Solutions, and she's a highly qualified and experienced HR generalist. So Elissa had no background in marketing or employer branding when we started working together. However, she did such a great job leading Bravura from using, by her own admission, bland organisational rhetoric in their employment marketing to having crystal clear clarity around their EVP. And she's got a great story. I can't wait for you to hear it. So please make sure you pay close attention to what Elissa has to share. Over to you, Elissa.
Thanks, Margie, and hi, everyone. I'm pleased to be able to share my story and the insights that I've gained along the way. So a bit about Bravura. We're a global software company that specialises in software for financial services companies. We have over 1,400 people, 12 offices across 7 different regions. And we're a growing business with a mix of IT, consulting and salespeople. So when I first took on this role, it became clear that employment branding was something that we desperately needed to invest in. There were a raft of reasons why, and some of you may be able to relate to some of my key drivers. So Bravura has grown quickly through a series of acquisitions, and we'd not yet found our identity. So there were no defined values or culture, and our offering wasn't clear, which was making it much more challenging for us to recruit. Traditionally, we'd turned to agencies and we invested a lot of money in recruitment. So we decided to introduce a direct sourcing model with clear targets, and part of that was about boosting our internal referral program. To do this, we needed our employees to act as brand ambassadors. We also were in a position where we had no ATS or brand strategy, so it was a very manual and reactive environment. We've always been hiring in high volume, predominantly tech staff, and being a B2B, a lot of our talent target had not heard of us. Our website is extremely out of date, embarrassingly so. Our job ads, they lack consistency across the globe, and we just really hadn't invested in those things. So simply there was no clarity in sort of how to sell the opportunity to market. And finally, from a personal perspective, creating an employment brand was daunting, something I'd never done before. We have a small marketing team who aren't experienced in employment branding. So in my situation, the HR team had ownership of this project and marketing were happy to support. However, there was an obvious gap in internal capability. I was concerned that we were going to, fumble our way through it, putting time and effort into producing an end product that we weren't happy with. But I sat and I reflected, and I knew that the team had ambitious recruitment targets. I knew we were losing some really great candidates, and I knew that our offer needed to be more compelling. So I started looking at my options to both get our brand and our EVP developed. One being an agency and the other going it alone. So I just wanted to share a few of the things that I learnt as I considered which path to take. So firstly, budget. So in many businesses, getting budget can be a challenge. For me, I was able to get budget for software projects. However, investment in brand required some coaxing and a thorough business case. So initially I saw some quotes from employment brand agencies, but the cost was prohibitive. I couldn't work out a way to convince our CFO to spend 100 to 150K plus creative and content development. Going it alone was intimidating and to me felt fairly unachievable with a range of other priorities on my plate. So I decided the best option was to right-size it and find an expert that could support us through the process. Next, insider knowledge. So firstly, no one knows or understands your business, your brand, and your people like you do. We wanted to be actively involved in the process to ensure quality and as a learning opportunity for the team. And most of all, we didn't want another agency cookie cutter EVP that didn't represent and didn't differentiate us from our competitors. One of the things that I've learned is that your EVP needs to truly reflect your people, environment, the business. It has to resonate with your candidates. And only you and your team have this level of intimate knowledge. Next is insight. So speaking to people directly through our focus groups and interviews enabled us to gain deep insights into what drives and motivates them. Analysing the data globally was extremely useful. The themes clear, the insights were much broader than I expected. So we were able to use the data to inform executive discussions and leadership training in ways that we'd never been able to do before. And finally, building capability. So there's an unexpected side effect of creating your EVP in-house, in that it creates a valuable opportunity to build your own capability and the capability of your team. So this process enabled me to become the go-to employment branding expert at Bravura. So I've been able to provide content for various projects and even some pushback when other stakeholders voice opinions that don't align to the brand that we've developed. One example of this is related to the creation of our new global website. So we had a range of imagery come back from marketing and our web developers that was extremely corporate, so lots of suits, and it was totally misaligned with how employees had described our relaxed and welcoming culture. For me, it was very powerful to have this research to guide our decision making.
All great points there, Elissa. Thank you for sharing. So if what Elissa has spoken about so far has inspired you, then your mind is probably ticking over with the how. How do you approach the process of developing your EVP in-house, and where do you start? So a robust EVP program has 5 overarching steps. Firstly, an EVP project is as much about influencing and engaging stakeholders as it is about creating your value proposition. And you want to make sure that you've got the support of all the right people before you embark on the program. You'll need to gather insights about your people and the employment experience that you're delivering. And after you've conducted the research, you'll have a lot of data to analyse and distill into themes which form the basis for your EVP. With the data neatly categorised, you'll then funnel it into a practical messaging framework, and then you get to the fun part. You get to figure out and document exactly how your EVP will be creatively communicated to your internal and external audiences. So I'd like you to think about these 5 steps as holding buckets for a lot of other activities that fall within them. Now, we don't have time to cover all of the detail of every single activity in a 60-minute webinar, but listen in closely, because I'm going to give you a few of the most crucial key elements within each step and show you some of the specific frameworks and how-tos that I personally use that will help you get a head start in creating your own EVP. So step 1. Developing an EVP shouldn't be about a project team hiding away in a boardroom to come up with the right value proposition and announcing it with a great big splash. Now, this actually happens a lot more frequently than you think, and it's an absolute recipe for failure. So you want to make sure that you're engaging everyone in the organisation. So starting with leadership, making sure that your program is aligned to your business goals and objectives, and this is going to help you avoid lengthy sign-off delays. Next, make friends with marketing. Make sure that you're getting them on board and getting their endorsement and support. And a good way to do that is to look for alignment between what you're doing in your employer brand program and the things that they are being KPI'd on. And then everyone else in the organisation, as much as possible, you want to communicate and bring them along on the journey. Create EVP champions who then become brand ambassadors. Ultimately, that's what you want, as many brand ambassadors as possible inside the organisation who's going to help elevate and amplify your message into the market. Now, often the starting hurdle for many people is, how do I build that business case to invest time and resource into the EVP development process? And certainly a few of you on the call today have expressed that that's a challenge for you. So let's look at how you can firstly get conceptual buy-in to work on your EVP from your leadership. So everything needs to be firmly anchored and aligned to the business strategy. So this is a mapping exercise that you can do with the business. And if you sit down and work through this exercise with them, it's really helpful to get everyone onto the same page. So it starts with articulating your key business goal. So maybe in this example, your goal might be to provide a best-in-class online experience for customers to engage with our brand and products. So it then leads through to a talent goal. And so the talent goal could be expand our developer team by 40 people over the next 12 months, which is no mean feat. The brand challenge that arises from that is, could be that being a B2B brand, we're not on the radar of our target talent. And there's already a shortage of talent in this sector. We're competing against big brands for tech talent like your Googles, your Microsofts, your Airbnbs, but then all the banks, the supermarkets, the airlines, as well as nimble startups, everyone's looking for developers. So this means that you know what you're looking for, you know what the challenges are, so you have a communication objective. And that objective might be to organically place ourselves at the heart of tech professionals in key locations and educate them about the possibilities of working for our organisation. And to help them understand that they'll gain a much broader breadth of experience and exposure, possibly because of the wider scope that your particular tech roles have for them. And then finally, the risks of not hitting your hiring goals. So work through this together with the business and, help them understand that failure to innovate and attract developer talent means that we will lag behind our competitors, resulting in significant reduction of profits. If you can put a figure on it, then all the better. And if you can articulate and help the business to understand the bottom line impact of not having a well-defined EVP, that's going to hit them where it matters to them the most, and it's going to help open them up to supporting your efforts to work on your brand. Now, Sophie, I think you mentioned wanting to get marketing on board, so this slide is for you. If you want to get marketing on board, you need to speak their language. And at its core, employer branding is a form of marketing. Instead of marketing a product or service, the product is the career that you're offering. So let's take a look at how this works. The goal of marketing is sales, whereas the goal of employer branding is hiring the best talent. Now you have an audience, and your audience for your marketing activities are your prospects and your customers, whereas your audience for employer branding is your candidates and your employees. In marketing, you have a customer value proposition. In employer branding, you have an employee value proposition. Now, any good marketing program has a strong call to action, whether that be to purchase your products or your services. In employer branding, the call to action is come work with us. And there's a journey that you take your customers on, from awareness of your brand through to, and your products, through to interest, intent, and ultimately purchase. And in a similar vein, a good employer branding program will take a candidate from awareness to engagement, through to consideration, and ultimately hire. So the key takeout here is to start to think and act like a marketer, and to do so, you want to speak to marketing in their language. Next principle in step one is segmentation of your audience, and that's critical to developing messaging that's relevant and engages your target talent. So you don't want to push the same message out to software developers as you would do to, say, salespeople. So ideally, you want to prioritize talent segments based upon your workforce plan. So what are the projected areas of growth for the business? What are the roles that you will need to fill to support business growth along with, the other critical business needs? And which of these critical roles are typically the hardest to fill? So you can see from this chart that we're not trying to solve for everything when creating an EVP, because that could potentially take years, especially in a larger, more complex organisation with multiple locations, as some of you have indicated today. You've got a lot of locations. So for roles that are not critical or especially hard to fill, then typically you would use company-wide EVP messages. However, for roles that are critical and hard to fill, and they are in projected areas of growth for the business, you do want to invest the time and the energy to create customized EVP messages. And the more diverse segments and locations that you select, the potentially more complex your EVP will be. Now, Elissa, I know that you had a few aha moments as you went through this process yourself, so perhaps you'd like to share about how you approach that.
Yeah, absolutely. So for Bravura, we had 7 different regions and 4 main departments with a range of different role types. Part of our strategy is to change our shape. So in particular, we're hiring more graduates and entry-level roles, as well as meeting a number of diversity targets. So rather than just focusing on the roles that we needed to hire in high volume, this process enabled us to analyse both the criticality and difficulty to hire, and we then layered those elements from our strategic plan. From there, our focus was narrowing it down as much as possible. So in the end, we chose 3 talent segments to focus on. That was developers in India and Poland, graduates and entry-level roles globally, and consultants in the UK and South Africa.
Right, and I know that this definitely helped you to really streamline the approach that you took to the research and the development of messages, which was great and helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So in your worksheets, there's a space for you to conduct this mapping exercise yourself. So after the webinar, I'd like to invite you to sit down and map out those roles that you typically hire for so that you can get a clear visual picture of which roles you can use general company-wide EVP messages for, and which are the ones that you want to invest in creating customized messages, because this is going to help you prioritize your time and energy and streamline your own EVP projects. So do make sure that you get onto that. So the final thing that I want to share with you from step one is really about creating an alignment checklist, which includes covering off all the activities and stakeholder meetings that are going to be necessary to take place prior to the research kicking off. You also want to get sign-off from your stakeholders on business and talent objectives, as well as share your research questions and make sure everyone's on board with how you're approaching that as well. So conducting these meetings and checks in advance is critical to avoid misalignment between program expectations and what you're going to deliver. And it's also a really handy tool to demonstrate to your stakeholders that you've thought through all of the issues and program interdependencies that your project will deliver, and to show that your project will deliver, you know, that value to the business that they'll be looking for. Okay, let's move to step two. So you'll need to gather insights about your people and the employment experience that you are delivering. And in step two, rather than showing you what to do, I actually want to highlight one area where I see organisations who are doing it for themselves getting it wrong. And it's the one key area that I think is just so important to get right. So you really want to avoid making this mistake. And that mistake is believing that you can use employee engagement surveys or using insights from a values development project as replacement for brand data. These pieces of data are great indicative starting points, but they're not the whole story. So you cannot create a differentiated EVP from survey data, because surveys by their very nature are designed to elicit responses based upon a predefined set of questions and answers. So it's not starting from a blank sheet of paper. It won't tell you what's most important to your people, and you're really missing the gold here. So, and the gold is in the why. And the key to eliciting the rich answers that will inform your EVP is in the probing follow-up questions. Now, you only get to ask probing follow-up questions if you conduct qualitative research. So you've probably noticed when it comes to career messaging, a lot of organisations are pretty much saying the same thing. And I want to illustrate the difference between generically talking about career opportunities versus giving a real glimpse inside the organisation. So here's an example. At our company, our people are challenged every day. It's pretty bland, and I'm sure you've heard that before. And the question to ask is, how far do you think that this is going to go or would go to differentiate your organisation from your competitors? And if you compare it to something like, I'm given the responsibility to set the product vision and lead teams to drive new product development outcomes, which makes me feel important and valued. So wow, that sounds a whole lot more interesting. So if I were a product developer or designer or a product manager, I'd probably be curious to find out more about this company. Let's take a look at another example. At our company, our people have access to varied and interesting work. Now, what does that actually mean? What's your definition of varied and interesting work? This doesn't paint any kind of picture. It doesn't elicit any kind of emotion. So if you compare it to something like, I love the challenge of working with rich, wide and varied data sets to develop new products that serve the needs of the entire market. So can you see why a lot of companies end up developing a cookie cutter EVP? It's because all the flavor and the stories and those juicy descriptive bits, the bits that candidates actually care about, it's information that they're hungrily seeking out. They're only surface when you take the time to conduct proper qualitative research. So my view is, if you're going to take the time to build an EVP, then you want to create one that actually works. And by that, I mean you want an EVP that cuts through the noise in the market and gets talent to sit up and take notice of you. Okay, the second exercise in your worksheet is to assess your current talent marketing messages. So what I'd love you to do after today's session is look at each of the priority type talent segments that you've identified in exercise 1 and jot down the top 3 messages, whether written or verbal, that you're currently using to attract talent. And then circle whether those messages are differentiated, emotive, segmented, descriptive, are they real and proven, i.e. are they authentic? So I think this is a really good exercise to help you really anchor in on whether your messages are effectively helping you attract the best talent. Okay, let's move on to step 3. Now that you've got all the data from your deep probing questions, it's time to analyze it. And this part can feel very intense and overwhelming, as you will have likely collected a lot of data if you've done a good job and a thorough job with your research. So the thing to do is to organize the data from all of the interviews and focus groups by talent segment. You're looking for consistent pieces of feedback that can be grouped into themes. So you want to look at what's most important to your employees and what's being delivered, and then really highlighting and honing in on the impact on the individual. And this is really the most important data. It's the why, and this becomes your proof points, and your proof points can then be translated into your marketing messages. Now, for those of you who do have multiple locations, you are looking for notable differences between those locations so that you can dial up and dial down messages in different locations depending on what's most important to the individuals that you've spoken to there. Now, where an employment experience is consistent with one of your organisational values, mark it off with a V, because this is how you can also bring your values to life within your EVP. So Elissa, would you like to talk about what you learned as you went through the research and data analysis phase?
Yeah, so here we'd gathered feedback and opinions from all parts of the business, different regions, departments, recent joiners through to some of our longer term employees. And what surprised us the most was how much the data was drawn upon afterwards, and still to this day and beyond this particular project. So this process helped us to understand what's important to our people. We were able to show what's working well in the business and could take steps to harness that. We could see where things were being delivered inconsistently, whether that was across regions or across departments, and of course gain some insights into what's broken. Global HR have used the data to inform a whole range of activities. So it's helped us to develop content for manager training and guide some of our L&D priorities. This process also highlighted that building a new performance framework was an absolute priority, and that's something we're undertaking now.
Wow. So thanks, Elissa. You can see that there's a bunch of different use cases beyond the talent attraction messages. So it really is worthwhile to take the time to do a thorough job of the research and analyze the data really, really well. Okay, so now that you're armed with those detailed insights from your research, you want to funnel it into a practical messaging framework. And this is your EVP brand story architecture. I believe in keeping things as simple as possible. So let's take a look at an example of what this looks like. So your brand story architecture consists of, firstly, your employment promise. So this is one big subconscious emotive idea as opposed to a strapline or a tagline. I think that's something that people get pretty hung up on. What's the tagline going to be? But that's really just the tip of the iceberg. I suggest that it's more important for you to focus in on what the employment promise is going to be. And this is the underlying notion that underpins every piece of communications that you will do in the future. So basically every campaign that you do, every piece of content you create on your website, every job ad that you run, the question that to ask is, does it support the statement in the minds of our candidates and our people around who we are and how we're relevant? Next, you have an elevator pitch. And this is a short expression of your employment promise, which over time, we'd love everyone in the organisation to be able to articulate, even if it's in their own words. Your EVP pillars consists of usually 3 to 4, maximum 5, I would say, pillars that categorize and encapsulate the employment experience that you deliver that are most important to your people and to your candidates. And then you have proof points that bring your pillars to life. And they are the platform for storytelling in a meaningful way that speak to the key drivers of each of your talent segments. So at this point, it can be helpful to collaborate with an internal or external copywriter to help you nail these words. You might also want to test those messages. We call it concept testing, just to ensure that nothing has been lost in the distilling of the messages. So typically you would run an EVP development workshop to get to this point, and that is something that I teach my clients how to do. When they work with me, they get all of the templates and guidance for them to use in running their own workshops. So Elissa, so that the viewers can see what this looks like in practice, would you walk us through the brand story architecture that you and your team landed on?
Yeah, absolutely. So once we got to this point, there was so much that we wanted to say, and it was very much a question of how do we do that in a meaningful and succinct way. What we learnt is that our people stay, and now we know why. They're surrounded by smart, passionate people who enjoy collaborating with each other around the world, and that very much became the essence of our brand promise. In our elevator pitch, we focused on problem solving, making an impact, and we brought in our 3 values and key cultural elements like flexibility, as these were major themes in our research. In total, we had 21 EVP points that people said we deliver consistently across the globe. And that was distilled into 4 pillars. So our journey, our culture, our people, and our work. And behind that are proof points that talk to the 3 talent segments that I mentioned before. So having all of this in play is extremely useful. It's ready to go content, and we're able to provide it to stakeholders for various projects. I see it as, you know, a bank of messaging that we're able to draw on time and time again.
That's great. And I know that, you know, you've spoken to me informally since the project about how helpful it is to not be sitting in front of a computer screen figuring out what to write if you're, you know, wanting to develop a piece of content or, you know, some copy for the website or even, you know, running campaigns. So for those of you watching this, it is work to get to yourself to this stage, but it is well worth putting in that effort because it's just so handy to have. Okay, so the next step is to look at how you're going to bring all that ready-made messaging to life. And this is the fun part. You get to figure out and document how your EVP will be creatively communicated to your internal and your external audiences. And so to do this, you probably want to lean on your internal design team if you have one, or else find a designer who can help with you. Now, they're going to need a solid brief that helps them understand your key objectives. So what do you want to get out of the visuals? How's it going to work? What's it going to do for your business? Help them understand your EVP, the pillars and the statements that you've created, because they are the seed of inspiration for the creative. And you want to work to understand the corporate brand guidelines that they need to work within, or help them understand those guidelines. And basically, the tighter the brief you give, the better they can deliver on this for you. Your output that you are working or collaborating with them on is a creative toolkit, and that is essentially like an approved brand style kit, which you have in place, which makes it so much easier when you're trying to develop tactical campaigns on the run. So your creative toolkit has a single aim, and that is consistency, because consistency drives brand equity. So your creative toolkit is going to explain the EVP to anybody who needs to use that toolkit, and it demonstrates the practical application of it on a daily basis. So all of the visual design, the messaging, and the execution across a variety of channels like your job ads, your career page, and in particular video, which I want to highlight a little bit more, because I feel that we're only going to see more frequent use of video as it becomes more mainstream. And we're going to see a move away from the highly polished and branded hero videos to the videos that feel more authentic, real, raw, and original. Now, one of the trends as well is personalization of video content, and that's key because highly targeted content is what's going to deliver the best ROI. And that's why the talent segmentation that I talked about earlier is just so critical, because it ensures that you'll have customized EVP messages in order for you to create customized video content, or any kind of content for that matter. So videos really is going to go beyond the usual brand education and day in the life type videos through to hiring manager videos, starting to explain the role and team purpose and culture. We're already seeing, you know, lots of organizations using video job ads. Recently, I've heard more organizations talk about doing candidate rejection videos to make it more human. Pre-onboarding videos to keep in touch with new hires and make them feel welcome from the outset. And this is just in the candidate space. There's a lot more use cases beyond the obvious, and we haven't even, you know, started talking about employee engagement and comms. Okay, so once you have that architecture in place and you have a creative toolkit in place, you're good to go. You're ready to go off and start creating the fun stuff. And, you know, I've noticed that everyone wants to jump straight to the fun stuff, the sexy stuff, and, you know, the development of content and materials like your website, your campaigns, do photo shoots, the videos, your social media posts. But hopefully you can see from what we've shared so far that you've got to lay the right foundation, because nothing will kill off your reputation in the labour market faster than doing a great job advertising a work experience that you don't deliver. Okay, Elissa, now that you've been through this process and you have an EVP, I'd love it if you could share with us what's changed for you. What's the specific return on investment that you and the team have achieved, and where to from now for Bravura?
Yeah, so the global TA team are achieving excellent results. So our direct recruitment stats are increasing each quarter. And there's been a significant jump in our employee referrals already. Our capability and confidence is skyrocketed. Employment branding is layered into everything we do. And for me, you know, it's something I'll be able to draw on for the rest of my career. We've delivered our first global ATS avatar. And this process has informed a range of things as part of that project. So imagery, copy, the email communication, etc. We're now building out our global onboarding process. So that's where we're sort of getting into EVP style content, videos, etc. And the part that we're most excited about is seeing our brand come to life through the new website, which will go live early in the year, and I'll share some of that with you now. So this is the website as it stands. As you can see, it's bland corporate rhetoric that doesn't differentiate us. Visually, it's unengaging. There's been no ownership internally across you know, marketing, HR, etc. So a lot of the content is out of date. There's no EVP style messaging. And for me, you know, there's nothing more embarrassing than working for a software company and telling a candidate not to look at your website, which unfortunately has happened quite often. So moving to, I guess, the future for the new year, these are some screenshots of our new website, which is in production. So it brings our 4 brand pillars to life with words and imagery. There's clarity in our messaging, and content is built directly from our EVP research. I'm extremely proud of what we've achieved. We now have a clear understanding of our employee experience globally and are able to represent that through well articulated and engaging messaging. This is very much the first gateway into the candidate experience, and candidates are able to gain insights into what it's like to work at Bravura and decide whether that appeals to them. Our messaging remains consistent from the website through to their first interaction with our TA team and beyond. And we're also applying this content to our job ads so that there's global consistency. moving away from job description type ads that list duties to much more appealing messaging that sells the opportunity. Campaigns like LinkedIn and other social media channels. So we're using it for candidate networking functions and group hiring days. So for example, in India. Also in interview guides, so training our interviewers to ensure there's consistency in the way that they're talking about Bravura, with our onboarding project, and also our overarching global brand framework will help to guide some of the graduate marketing activity we'll be doing as well.
There's a whole lot of stuff in there. So it's so exciting to see all the different ways that you'll be using this going forward. So as you can see, it's not just for candidate communications. There are just so many uses and applications for your EVP insights and messaging. All right, so the question that you might have now is, are you ready to DIY your EVP? And so here are some indicators that you just might be. So firstly, the business is growing, and looking to the future, you've defined the critical talent segments that are most important to fuel that growth. And you've articulated the importance of having a strong and unique employer brand message to your leadership, and they understand the challenges that you're facing in attracting their talent. And I suspect that they too are feeling the pain and are aware of the risks of not achieving business goals if they don't have the essential talent. Creating an in-house EVP will take resources, and you need to be prepared to free up the internal resources for a period of time to execute on an effective EVP project. So if you can identify an internal project lead, such as like Elissa, who can engage and influence stakeholders and take the organisation on this journey, then that's a really good starting point. Resources is one thing, the other is effort. You're going to need to be willing to roll your sleeves up and work hard at it. So you're not just looking to hand this over to an agency or consultant to do it all for you and hand you back a strategy document. So you're putting in the effort so that you can take full ownership of the process and the outcomes that will work best for you and your business. And then you've got the blessing and support of your stakeholders like marketing, who are going to back you to do this project. So we've provided a lot of information today that will get you on the right track to creating your own EVP, and you can absolutely do this yourself. But even with all of that in mind, I know that some of you are still going to be looking for guidance and support to get this done. So I want to share with you how you can get that help and support in just 16 weeks so that you can avoid costly mistakes, and it doesn't have to become a project that loses momentum and drags out over months, even over years, because I have heard of this happening. So over the years, I've been personally frustrated to see people attempting to do their EVPs in-house and investing a lot of time and effort figuring out how to do it themselves, and then still being disappointed with the effectiveness of their EVP. So at the EVP Co, we've created a comprehensive EVP development program called Master Your EVP to help clients save months of trial and error and support them through the process, and then save tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars on brand agency fees. So I've taken all of the IP from years of creating EVPs client side and consulting, and developed a structured step-by-step program where I hold your hand through the entire EVP development process so that in 16 weeks you're ready to roll. And these are the key steps that you need to follow if you want to develop an EVP that works. I hope that the information today that we've shared has inspired you that you can do this on your own. You absolutely can. And if you choose to, you can take this outline and you can do it yourself. However, if you feel that you want that further help and hand-holding along the way, then the Master Your EVP program is a blueprint that breaks down these 5 steps into bite-sized actionable modules with done-for-you templates and tools at each stage, guidance on bringing your stakeholders on the journey so that you have everything you need to get your EVP done right the first time. You get plenty of one-to-one access to me because much as this is a proven process, every organisation is different, and I'll be there to help you adapt the program to any nuances inside your organisation and coach you through any of the challenges and roadblocks that you might face. Yeah, I've got to say my absolute jam these days is helping clients to build their own capability and confidence around doing employer branding for themselves. So Elissa, it would be great if you could share with us the kind of experience you had in going through this program with me.
I'm on mute. that moment where it's getting late in the evening. Okay. So for me, working with Margie was a fantastic experience. When I first spoke to Margie, it was clear that she had the perfect mix of experience, and she'd worked with a range of different businesses, and she wasn't going to allow us to create that cookie cutter EVP. So Margie provided a clear structure and process that I could follow, which meant that I constantly felt in control of what needed to be achieved and when. And pleasantly, I didn't have to do much of the thinking. So the templates, the coaching materials were really comprehensive, and the calls validated the steps, enabling me to ask any questions that I had. Margie's energy and passion kept me motivated and on track, so we never lost momentum. We had really open conversations and built a trusted relationship, and I always felt like Margie had my back. What I loved is how organised and well-informed I felt, which made me look good when reporting back to our steering committee and other stakeholders. It's very much an achievable process that enables you to deliver output that will support a whole range of initiatives. So for anyone that's undecided, I would say the investment is absolutely worth it. Having a clear employment brand has had so many benefits, and the results speak for themselves.
Great, Elissa. Thank you for sharing that. And special thanks to you for giving up your valuable time this evening to share your story and your learnings with our viewers. What you've achieved for your business, as well as, just watching you become more and more confident around the marketing conversation, is really inspiring. And I'm sure the people watching as well are inspired and putting themselves in your shoes right now, thinking, gosh, if Elissa can do this, then so can I. Okay, so if you're looking at your employer branding and it's not where you want it to be, maybe you're struggling with engaging stakeholders or getting budget, and you don't want to mess around figuring it out for yourself, and you don't want to waste time making mistakes or having to backtrack after launching, so you want to get it right first time around. Maybe you can see the opportunity to build your professional reputation, because studies show the positive impact of an employer branding program can have on an organisation, but you have to do it right the first time. But the opportunity to lead that and have that kind of impact is huge. So if you need help right now, I have space available for a few strategy calls. In fact, we ran this webinar earlier this morning, our time, and there's already two of those places that have been taken. So there's 3 places left for people who are ready to make improvements in their employer branding. So we'll go over your business, your goals, what you're doing now, and where things are challenging for you, and we'll map out a plan to get this working for you. And I can make some initial recommendations which will help you get some clarity on your next steps. And from there you can decide whether you want to work with me or not, and either way is absolutely okay. You'll still get value from the call. Now, it takes a bit of time to prepare for these calls, which is why there's just 5 spots available. So I want to encourage you to book, but please only book if you're serious about making improvements in your employer branding, and just look out for an email follow-up from Video My Job to book your place. So let's briefly revisit what you've learned today. You've seen the power of having a strong EVP to help your business achieve its business goals through attracting the best talent. You've seen that it is possible to create your own EVP in-house, and the 5 steps that you need to take to make it happen. You've learnt that by taking the reins and doing this for your business, you will build your marketing capability and become the go-to person for all things in employer branding. And I've introduced a proven system for successful EVP creation. So the question to ask yourself is, if you think about your company's business strategy and where it wants to go, 12 months from today, or even 24 months from today, when you need people critically, if you've done nothing about your EVP, maybe it's going to come back and bite you on the backside. And I understand it can be hard to build a case to prioritize and create urgency to invest in employer branding and get it on the agenda of leadership. But the truth is that the business is already paying for it if you have a weak or ineffective employer brand right now. So if you're losing good talent to competitors, whether that's through the recruiting process or through attrition, then that's a real cost to your business. And this is something that I feel so super passionate about, that every business comes down to the quality of the people. And you can have the world's best strategy, but if you don't have the right people, the strategy won't work, because people execute on the strategy. So whether you decide to work with me if you decide to do it yourself, or even if you do decide to outsource to an agency, that's up to you. But the key message that I have for you is don't delay, because smart HR and TA leaders, in fact, smart leaders in general, are getting on the front foot when it comes to their employer brand, because the best time to work on your EVP is when you don't need it. So finally, while it's good to come along to these events and learn the theory, nothing changes unless you apply it. So the final thing I want to ask you to do when you get off the session today is visualize ahead to this time next year and imagine how different things might be if you have a compelling EVP in place. So what does that mean for your hiring efforts? How will that impact your employee engagement and retention? So based on what you've learned today, start to think about what are 3 proactive steps that you can take before the end of this year, just to start to get forward movement on your EVP so that you can set yourself up for success in 2020. Is it building the business case? So, is it building an alliance with the marketing team and getting on board? Is it doing an audit of your current marketing materials and messages to look at, what's being effective? Is it segmenting your talent? What can you start to do now so that you are getting some traction? Okay, I know we are at the end of the hour. I want to thank you for joining us for the EVP Masterclass. I really hope you got some value from the time you've invested with us today. I know we're out of time. If you do need to go, I totally understand. I want to respect your time if you need to click off. But if there are any questions, I'm happy to stay on, and hopefully, Elissa, just for a few minutes to answer a few questions. If Tamara, do we have any that?
Yeah, sure. We did have one question, and you did cover it, saying that your program is 16 weeks, but Ed was particularly interested in knowing whether or not it did actually take you 16 weeks, Elissa.
Yeah, it did, with one extra week in the mix of it, just because we got caught up with some of the work on the ATS. So the honest answer was 17, just to give me that 1 week break to catch up on another project, but it was completely achievable in the 16 weeks. And predominantly doing that myself, although I did involve the team in certain elements, often for their learning, I really drove this and did most of the work myself.
And then one of the other questions were, did you encounter any specific roadblocks or hurdles, either before you started the project or during it, that you overcame?
Yeah, look, there's a couple of points to share here. I mean, definitely the hardest part was getting started. Once I was in the project, it was really streamlined, but so much focus in software projects and other sort of key OD projects happening in the business, and it was hard to sell this idea of employment brand. So I mobilised a group of hiring managers. I worked really closely with corporate finance to come up with some key points for the business case to get the project across the line. So that was critical. Once we were in it, for me, it was about understanding my strengths, because it was a learning experience. And I know it was mentioned through the presentation, but I just wanted to highlight, getting a bit of budget for a copywriter if that's not your skill set, or bringing others like marketing into the project where appropriate was hugely beneficial, just to balance my skills and make sure that things progressed quickly. So yeah.
Great. Were there any last questions? If not, we have gone over, so we'll sign off, and we will follow up by sending the recording out and all the resources I mentioned during the presentation. So thanks for joining us today. Thank you, Elissa and Margie. Great insights and really handy framework for everyone to go away and have a think about.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.